Hi guys, Miss Andell here. I hope that you're having a really great week, and I hope that you've been enjoying the readings and the studies that we've been doing thus far in American Lit since the Civil War. Well, as you can tell in our most recent readings, we are neck deep in the movement of naturalism, and this week we will be as well. I know last week I kind of talked to you about naturalism and gave you some characteristics of naturalism, but I realize that some of you have not had me in Introduction to Literature either in the class or online. And so I copied off and created a handout for you this week that is over. It's a refresher on characteristics of both the realism movement and the naturalism movement. One thing for those of you who have not had me before, naturalism is actually a major movement that happens within realism. So you need to know what realism is to further appreciate the concentration and the focus of naturalism. So you'll also notice that when I give you sample authors of those movements, we are covering those authors week by week. So and you can tell we've covered quite a few of those, just the few that are listed. Well, this week we are covering Theodore Dreiser, who is a major American author and naturalist, and so your essay assignment is over him. But Jack London is another important writer, and I would say another kind of more recently appreciated writer. Your introduction will talk to you a little bit about how he was very popular and not necessarily academically and critically received, but now he has gained a lot of acceptance and credibility, and he is often anthologized with the other naturalistic writers. One thing I wanted to note before I go forward is I am going to be doing my instructor lecture over the handout that I created for you on Jack London's quotations. So you have a discussion board post over summaries of his novels and the introduction, but in this one I wanted to talk to you a little bit. There's some of them are excerpts from his poetry and some of them are excerpts from his book, but I always think it's very valuable to kind of look at what their quotations, like when you Google like what are their quotations, sometimes you can get an overview of all of their work and get a better idea perhaps of some of their ideology that may or may not be contained within the readings that we do. So I went ahead this week and created a handout for you. One thing I would suggest, I mean, you can listen to this video now, but I have listed this in the order of doing the summaries first and doing the introduction first, looking at the handout, realism, naturalism, and then looking with me at some of these quotations, because you kind of need to recall his body, his major works, and think about naturalism before we go into some of the quotations. But I wouldn't say it's an absolute thing. I mean, you're welcome to do these in whatever order you want to. I remember reading Jack London very early in elementary school. I grew up in Central California, at least until like we came here in the 8th grade. So the literature, they promoted a lot of works from Californians. So I remember they would abridge some of these works, and you guys know when you go to bookstores you can see abridged works for children, like children's versions of major works. And I remember in our readers, we read Jack London's The Call of the Wild, and I'm sure there's probably a movie out there. I can't remember if we watched the movie or not, but these are things that I was introduced to early on. John Steinbeck was another one. They had abridged versions, and then short stories of Steinbeck's. We're not up to him yet, but I remember Jack London very early on and being interested in his work, even though, good Lord, in elementary school I had no idea about naturalism and what some of his ideology was in his writings. I just thought it was really cool, the kinds of things he said. So let's go ahead together and take a look at some of the things he writes, and then let's think about, without getting into the novels that you're reading summaries of, let's just take a look at some of the quotations here, shall we? Okay, so I thought some of these kind of reflected who he was as a person and demonstrated his worldview. And I don't know if I've talked to you about what worldview means, but it's an idea that artists and you're the same way, that there are things that come out of our mouths or in our writing that are repeated, that are very important ideas to us. Like, for instance, if you say very often, you can do this, you've got this, it's within you, nothing's impossible. If you tend to say that a lot, it will come out not only in your, it's in your mind as a way of, but it'll come out in the way you speak, it'll come out in the way you write, the way you encourage, the way you talk to people. So a worldview is something that emerges consistently in our lives. So it's something that we believe, a foundation. And I think some of these quotations kind of help us understand more about Jack London and who he was and what he believed, what he espoused. So I included a couple of pictures for you of the author, but let's go ahead and look at one or two of these together, or three or four, or how many have I put on here. So at the top right from Martin Eden, it says, "But I am I, and I won't subordinate my taste to the unanimous judgment of mankind." First of all, I love this. If I had a chalkboard wall, this would go on it. I really like this, and I wish we could have like a little dialogue going on right now, but the best I can do is your discussion board dialogues. But I want you to notice the individualism here. And this is also seen in his novels, right? The novels that you're going to read about, the summaries that you're doing. So there's this emphasis for him about what it means to be an individual. And I love this. I mean, I'm not trying to read too much in here, and I hope you enjoy this. "I won't subordinate my taste to the unanimous judgment of mankind." And you get this idea that if I'm one against the world, I don't care if everybody, my computer's shutting off for some weird reason, I don't care if everybody else feels this way, I am not going to change my tastes. I am going to stick to my guns, and if I believe something's true, I don't care who all believes it. And so, that's true. So many people are moved. So many people are easily persuaded by others and the voice of the majority. And he says, "I am I," and that emphasis on I, the individual. You see this here. So let's take a look. I don't want to just give everything away, but let's take a look at some of the other things that are here. "I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet." I really like that. And this gives you an idea of what kind of life he's living. And you guys read about, I don't know if you've gone online to read anything about him. I know that the introduction in the book is a little short, so if you're interested, you might want to read a little bit more. But he had some health problems, and he died in early age. He was younger than I was. I'm not going to tell you how much, because that will tell you how old I am. But he did not make it past that fourth decade. So he barely made it to the fourth decade, and he died. So he had some health problems, and sometimes, sadly, it's when we have health problems that we appreciate life the most. Would you agree? I mean, I don't know, but for many people, we begin to appreciate life more when we have health problems, or when people we love have health problems, or there's some kind of issue that reminds us that life is fleeting. And you kind of see that here. "I would rather be a superb meteor than a sleepy and permanent planet." And I love this here because he really didn't get to live a long life. And he said, "The life I live, I want it to burn brightly. I want to burn, burn, burn. I want to use every breath I have, every ounce of energy I have." And not only is that inspiring everybody, but it's kind of an interesting challenge in our minds and to us. Are we living our lives? It doesn't matter if you live until you're 102 or you die next year. A lot of people live their lives as if they have 100 years, and 100 years will go by just like that. For one thing, every life that we lead is short. And this begs the question, how are we going to live it? We're not guaranteed tomorrow. So are we going to choose to burn brightly and live a life that we enjoy every day of our life, every moment, of our lives? It's worth thinking about. Fear urged him to go back, but growth drove him on. I think that can relate to us in so many ways. And, fear is something everybody struggles with, some kind of fear, whether, this goes into what we would call anxiety today, or whether this goes into whatever. But there's so many things that we're uncomfortable with to the point of fearing it. But I love this. Growth drove him on. So what drove him on was an instinctual need for more. So I like this, though, because if you know about his health problems, fear urged him to go back, but growth drove him on. This is consistent with what he just said about the meteor, about the need to, what is this life about? Growing, learning, burning brightly, enjoying it, embracing every moment. Okay, let's look at the other one. The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. Again, can you hear that? I mean, some of these quotes that I chose to put on this page for you really have to do with, I think, something that's important for all of us today. Talk about, I always ask you, how's this relevant? How does this relate to us? Well, this relates to all of us today. How do we feel about the time we're given? The next one says he was a silent fury who no torment could tame. Do you guys see how a lot of these have to do with his life? They're almost autobiographical, but look where they're coming from. Some of them aren't said, but when I looked up the quotes, some of them are from his novels, like from the pages of the novel, and I love that. Sometimes fear keeps us from moving on, and it says he was a silent fury, no torment. Nothing could intimidate him. Nothing could keep him from exploring or doing or following his heart or his passion. And I hope you find this inspirational today because, it really is. It's something to think about. That's why I went ahead and made a page with pictures that you could print out and keep somewhere in a file or whatever. The wild still lingered in him, and the wolf in him merely slept. I like that. That's kind of neat. And you can take that 1,000,001 ways. But I really liked, that's naturalistic big time. The chaos, the Freudian id. Those of you who are get in those notes again. And I know I've talked about this, but the psychology of the wild within and what you do with it. And the wolf in him merely slept. So the wolf within. That's kind of an interesting Freudian reference, and that's definitely a part of naturalism. And let's go to this last one that I included. It says, I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze than it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, here it is, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet. The function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. And you can see how those other quotes actually come together. And you can see how powerful they are together as well. Okay, one last note. I know I'm on 12 minutes, but one thing I want to talk to you about is the assignment that I'm giving you on novels, and I'm going to probably do that in part 2 so the video doesn't mess up. Okay, I'll see you in just a minute.